Hey everyone, welcome to this video tutorial. Tonight I am walking through with you A-Level Sociology Paper 3, Crime and Deviance with Theory and Methods. This will give you an outline of every question that was on that paper with some very important examiner commentary, and make sure that you stay right to the end because there is going to be some very important advice about the research methods questions, which were questions 5 and 6. As always, massive thank you for watching. If you like to see these videos as they happen, please make sure you click subscribe, including the bell for notifications. If this video answers any questions that you have, please click like, and if you want to ask me anything, please copy it in the comments below. So before we get into it, let's just have a quick glance at the front cover so you know exactly what you have to be doing. So your main instructions are that you've got to use black ink. Make sure you fill in the boxes right at the top of the page. This is what we're talking about here. So you'll need your centre number, your candidate number. Make sure you know your name and your surname and your candidate signature. Anything that you're not sure about, you ask your exam invigilator and they should help you out. Make sure that you are answering all the questions. There is 6 questions in total. You will be able to see that on the front page as well. Answer all the questions in the space provided. Do all your rough work, your plans in the answer booklet as well. Anything that you don't want marked, you cross that out. The marks for the questions are shown in brackets, and that will give you an indication about how much you should be writing and how long for. The maximum amount of marks for this paper is 80. Any questions that are 10 marks or above should be answered like an essay. So you are being assessed on your ability to use good English, organise the information clearly, so making sure you've got good paragraph structure, and make sure that you are using as many sociological keywords and terminology as possible. Starting off with the short questions, 4-mark and 6-mark questions. They will both be asking you to outline something. 4-mark outline 2 ways, 6-mark outline 3 ways, and you get the marks by breaking it down into 2 marks for each. So 1 mark for the identification point and 1 mark for the explanation point. Now, with this one, the trigger word was gender and also being a victim of crime. And you could either talk about males or females, with the most popular responses being that females are more likely to be vulnerable, which would link to them being a victim of domestic violence, or anything to do with patriarchy was often mentioned, whereas males, they are more likely to be a victim of violent crime as a result of masculinity. Now, some students failed to score on this question because they talked about how gender might influence somebody committing a crime rather than being a victim. Question 2 was the 6-marker. Now, this was answered pretty well using typical criticisms of labelling theory, such as it being determinist or neglecting the structural factors which might influence a person being labelled, but some still drifted into describing what the labelling process actually was. Now, in both the 2 short questions, question 1 and question 2, some answers were too long. You shouldn't be going on to extra pages onto this one. Both questions in total is worth 10 marks, and that means that you should be spending no more than 15 minutes answering those questions. Question 3 was your 10 marker. Now, like with paper 1, students were getting pretty good at being able to select at least one of the hooks from the item. The most popular being the agencies of the criminal justice system, such as the police and the courts, and also the second one, some individuals may have greater motivation or pressure to offend and have the opportunity to do so. Now, what I would say about this one is make sure that you are sticking to the social class differences. There was a small minority of students that did drift towards ethnicity away from what the question was actually asking. Now, once again, this is worth 10 marks, and you should be spending 15 minutes on this, writing 2 clear paragraphs, developing your answers from the hooks in the item. Now, remember that marks are available as AO3 for analysis or evaluation, so you can do either of those in this 10 marker with an item. Question 4 is your extended essay. Now, this is worth 30 marks, and it will always ask you to firstly refer from the item and your knowledge and to evaluate something. So make sure that you are offering some critical analysis or evaluation to get those vital AO3 marks. Now, the most effective answers here included a good range and depth of material. So students were typically writing about the social construction of the news, media representations of crime, media representations of victims and criminals, The role of the media in creating crime. So, for example, left realist approaches, people being relatively deprived, culturally included, economically excluded, labelling theory, moral panics and deviance amplification spirals, and the influence on policing as well. Now, explicit evaluation and applied and linked work quite well would have scored you quite good marks. Now, the weaker answers tended to be a little bit more descriptive. So, for example, describing Cohen's study into the modern rockers and moral panics and folk devils. So avoid just describing them, just making sure that you are answering the question and evaluating how effective that they are to allow us to understand the relationship between crime and the media. Once again, 30 marks available, 45 minutes. I recommend that you do plan your answers to make sure that you say exactly what you want to say in your answer and that you are evaluating as you go along. So questions 1 to 4 is the crime and deviance section. Moving on to the second section, which is the theory and methods, of which there are 2 questions. Question 5, which is a 10 marker, and question 6, which is a 20 marker. Now, question number 5 was a well answered question. Most students could offer at least 2 disadvantages of lab experiments. The most obvious being it was difficult to identify all the variables, or being a small sample tend to lack a representative nature of it, or ethical problems of using lab experiments. But what we did start to see with this one was that there was limited analysis evidence in the answers, which prevented some students getting into the top band. Another point, and this is your spoiler, a lot of students are still getting validity and reliability mixed up. And on this one, some students are still including evaluation. There is no marks available for evaluation on a 10-mark outline and explain. It will not be rewarded. You can analyse, you can offer critical analysis, but bolt-on evaluation will not be awarded. Question 6 was the 20 marker, which was also on a research method. Now, this final question did challenge some students despite the relative straightforward nature of it. But basically, the last question will always ask you to apply material from the item and your knowledge and evaluate something. In this case, it was asking you to evaluate structured interviews. Now, the problem with this was that students and the way that they answered the question was a little bit problematic, the way they structured their answers. They were pretty good at giving the advantages of using structured interviews, but it often ended up being quite list-like of the positivist characteristics of the advantages, but the students were unable to evaluate them as they go along. So a typical response being to this answer was, here is the positivist strength of structured interviews. Then an opposing paragraph, here's interpretivist, and this is why they don't like it. That is juxtaposition. That will only get you limited amount of marks. If you want to get into the top band, what you should be doing is giving an advantage of a structured interview, back it up with a bit of evidence, and then evaluate it. So despite this strength or this advantage, it could also lead to these problems, X, Y, and Z. And structuring your answer that way. The weaker answers, again, this is where some students are falling down, and this is what I want you to revise. Some students were confusing the key theory terms, such as validity and reliability. They're getting them mixed up. Validity means accuracy or truth. Is it capturing what you want it to capture? Whereas reliability means replicability. Can you repeat that method? So something like a structured interview is reliable. It is set questions. However, people will not be able to go into their own words. They're not be able to elaborate on their answers. So it will limit the validity of the research. All the pitfalls on this question was that some students were getting structured interviews and unstructured interviews mixed up. And lastly, positivist and interpretivist, they were getting confused as well. You need to know the difference between what a positivist is and what an interpretivist is. What kind of data do they prefer? What kind of research methods do they like? Because it is so useful in such a wide range of exam questions. They are useful in methods questions. They are useful in theory questions, such as Should sociology be a science? Should they be value free? Objectivity, subjectivity, and so on. So this video tutorial has just given you a brief walkthrough with some really insightful examiner commentary for you to use. If you have enjoyed it, please click like. If you've got any questions, you leave them at the comments below. Please subscribe, please share this if you want to, and keep in touch with me. I always answer every questions that everybody has, and I look forward to hearing from you again soon. Bye.